So let's get right into it. I have 8 of them. Number 1 is, do all of your movements align? Are all of your movements painting the same message? Are they pointing toward the same goal? And not that they have to, but as I've gone on, I've deleted entire movements I've sketched out of this symphony because it just didn't vibe. It's literally as simple as that. It didn't vibe. All the movements have to align together. It has to feel like a cohesive whole. Each movement is its own thing, but together their sum has to be purified, and you have to minimize the distortion of your vision. Number 2, I've realized that you have to have such a firm balance between the major and minor sound. Without getting more specific than that, I'm going to simplify it as major and minor, because I found out if I compose in major for too long, it just starts sounding fruity. And if I compose in minor for too long, it starts sounding depressing. But when I have both sides interplaying, and often interplaying pretty fast, like I don't need to have a whole major movement, a whole minor movement. I could have a major 16 bars, a minor 16 bars. I found that's when you get the real human emotions out, is when you can jump between major and minor and just let that flow when it naturally comes out. You don't have to stay in major just because you've been in major. Sometimes it hits you, oh, I need something depressing here. Or if you're in the middle of a minor piece, you're like, oh, this is too sad. Let's get this energy up a little. I've noticed major keys, you have to have the power. You have to have the power moving in there, because the major key does represent the masculine. If the power is not moving, that's where it sounds fruity or weak, or like you just wasted your time composing this piece. There has to be power and authority when you're composing in major keys. And likewise, in minor keys, there has to be a certain vulnerability, and you let more avenues be manifest that you might not necessarily do in major. You allow for a little bit more chaos in the minor, to let it be what it is, to let it be order becoming entropic. 3, who is this piece serving? Is it serving yourself as the composer? Is it serving your hypothetical audience? Ideally, it's serving both, but this has come to my mind because I want to serve myself in that I know I'm making something that is true to me. I'm not lying to the audience, but at the same time, I want my audience to get what I have to say. I don't want to spit genius, but no one else can understand it but me. I want them to understand it. And the best compromise, so to speak, you'll notice every point I'm about to give, it's all about balance. You want to be serving yourself as much as you're serving the other. When you serve the other, when you serve your audience, you serve yourself. When you serve yourself, you serve the audience. So it means be true, compose what you actually have in your mind, but make it to where they can understand it too, is what I'm realizing, especially as it gets bigger. Like I said, I did not think I'd be 40 minutes into this damn thing. And I realized that if I'm going to write 40 minutes of music or more, this might get up to an hour. It has to be worth their time. I'm not going to waste people's time listening to 40 minutes of my bullshit. It has to be perfect, and it is perfect. 4, it's how do you deal with your source material? Because if you excessively just throw out a different source material, different melodies you take from other people to embellish on, to use, it can become a gimmick, a crutch, a trope. So the biggest thing with source material is that I will use source material to have a big melodic climax, or I will use source material as counterpoint that supports a different rising melody. And mainly if I go to one of those two things, I use this source material in the most optimal way. It doesn't become a gimmick. And you have to be able to listen to when it's like, am I using this as a gimmick here? Am I expressing my vision, or am I just plugging something in and seeing if it works? And you should be plugging in your sketches, but in the final analysis, it is always your big vision first. Everything goes back to vision. And 5 is the level of contrapuntal density. This is a big thing I've been tackling recently, because I've realized you can't just go 5 or 6 voice counterpoint all out for the entire thing. You can't do that. I might even be exaggerating when I say 6, but definitely 5 voice. But sometimes you need places where there's only one voice. Whether the voice be loud or quiet, you only need one voice. You can't have this density all the time. And sometimes to get the melodic content across the way it needs to get across, it can't be so cluttered. The counterpoint is most efficient in development when you're in a development section. When it's time to let the melody shine, you gotta let it do its thing. It's like a singer. It's like on the verse and the choruses, the singer has to shine. The guitar solos later. And like I say, the development in classical music is the guitar solo of classical music. It's a good analogy. Same thing, essentially. So know when to be thick and know when to be thin. 6 is, I began to learn how long-winded can a development be. Beethoven's always made fun of because his development sections keep going on and on and on and on. But the thing with Beethoven is he earned it. It makes sense that his development is that long because it actually works. And that he actually keeps building momentum, or he'll surprise you in a way, but he'll always keep you on your toes. He'll keep you moving. So if you're going to have a long-winded development, make sure it is worth it. Make sure you're going somewhere. You can't be mindlessly just meandering around. Of course, there's a place for that. But in general, what I've found is I don't want to be meandering. I want to be direct, to the point. And I will modulate. I will have counter melodies that take it to a new place, melodically or tonally or motivically. But I found the best thing is you want to have your developments concise, because naturally you will make a long-winded development, but if you keep it concise, it'll end up being just the right amount it needs to be. Because a development, it needs to do what it needs to do, and you need to leave something on the table. You need to leave them wanting more. You can't have them bored in the development section. What the development is for, of course, to explore the ideas, but the big thing is, in a sonata form, I'm not saying this is all like sonata forms within the symphony, but it's the development is supposed to develop the idea and build it right back up into the melody. And if it can't do that effectively, what are you doing? And if you're not concise, it's going to feel like that melody comes out of nowhere when you do eventually get back to that. So it's to be more intentional with the architecture of your development section. But also the biggest lesson I've learned is to hear the next note that needs to come. Literally one by one, the next note needs to come. Don't be thinking 5 bars ahead. Be thinking at the bar you're on. Literally be in the moment. Don't think about the past. Don't think about the future of the composition. The exact note and bar you are on. Focus on that. Listen to that until you get the exact right note. If you do that, the damn thing writes itself. You don't have to write it. I don't feel like I'm writing it. I feel like I'm just here embodying it. I'm the lucky guy that gets to let it out as long as I'm staying on the process and continuing to do it. So what I've learned is to do not impose some idea you have in your head. You literally have to listen to it. And of course, with this project at least, there is going to be times where you have impositions. The fact I'm using source material law is an imposition. I'm going to stick this whole source material, I'm going to use it right here as the baseline foundation. And that might be an imposition, but as you build, your foundation will change. You'll change it a little bit, and what you build on top makes it a completely new animal anyways. If you take the source material melody, now it's a baseline. The melody is completely new, yet you can subtly, unconsciously almost hear that original melody underline it all. It's just not ringing out from the top, from the higher voices. And sometimes thematically you will have to seemingly impose. But what I found is if you're using your ear and listening for the next exact note, it's not going to be an imposition. You'll know when it's time to have your theme come back or you're throwing some source material. So that's the biggest thing, is you can't get ahead of yourself. You have to be patient. Stay on the bar you're on until you filled in all the notes of that chord that rings out in your brain. And so you have to be willing to take what's in your brain and put it on paper. And that can be a bitch. That really can be a bitch, but the more you do it, it becomes natural, and then you feel like a genius. I say this all in my videos, like when I learned how to compose, it made me feel like I gained like 30 IQ points overnight, essentially. All right, number 8, the final one, is orchestration. I wrote this whole thing on a MIDI grid. It's just a piano, so that's one instrument, one timbre. So it's almost hard to kind of make the voices distinct. I can do that in my ear and by looking at the grid. I can do it for my purposes. I know what's happening within the piece, but at the same time, for the piece to come across, you have to actually take orchestration into account. You have to make the voices distinct in timbre and purpose. You need cellos playing the low notes. The piano can play any range really. You know, woodwinds, brass, whatever the hell, they span a certain amount of range. But what I realized is like the composition is not going to come across without proper orchestration. That's what I love about Beethoven or Berlioz or Tchaikovsky. The texture can totally change. A violin can get very airy high notes. It can also hit the middle range. I feel like I'm blanking on examples to give you, but essentially it is that you do have to take the timbral aspect into account. And when you have a bunch of counterpoints, you have to actually, once you have all those voices, then you have to divide them back out. At least that's how I'm doing them. Ideally, you'd probably have an idea of orchestration while you're composing. I didn't do it that way. So it's I have to take the whole composition and separate the voices now. Grab a voice, take it out, be like, oh, that's the violins now. That's a piano. That's the fucking EDM. That's the fucking 808. This might be the first electronic symphony. That's good. It's actually good. But the biggest thing I would say is if you have a big artistic goal like this, just dive into it, because you'll find, I never thought I'd be thinking about any of these issues, but it's like when I actually got into it, it's like, oh, I'm learning X, Y, and Z. I've expanded my knowledge and now I can be here right now to tell that to you. And wouldn't you like to be in that space too? Do the process, learn what you need to learn through the process, then you could tell somebody else about what you just did and provide them value, while also providing yourself value. This goes back to point 3 I made, and that you can serve yourself and serve others at the same time. I realize ultimately all is serving self. If you have a topic you want me to talk about, leave it in the comments. I would like to address it. All right, thank you. Goodbye.